but also to Genevieve and Haley with the ABA section taxation for their work on this. Adam Abraham's helped out too. Um, so a lot of work, and really hope that this panel helps young tax professionals, students, anybody who's trying to decide how they want their tax career to look, to understand more precision how different tax careers can look for them. So with that, we'll jump into the bios and then we'll get the conversation rolling. So we have Demetrius Robinson, Lori Hawk, Ish Dalal, and Nick Berger with us today. Uh, Demetrius Robinson is a shareholder at Roetzel and Andress in Columbus, Ohio, in the firm's corporate tax and transactional group. He focuses his practice on representing companies and nonprofit organizations on tax law and business law matters. He does a variety of transactional matters and has also uh, worked in tax court with the IRS and state and local taxing authorities as well. Demetrius previously served as chair of the tax services practice group at his former firm and was a member of its startups and capitalizations team. Earlier in his career, he worked at Ernst & Young in its indirect tax practice, concentrating on employment tax matters. Robinson earned his LLM in taxation and business from Capital University Law School. Outside of his legal practice, Demetrius serves as a major in the U.S. Army National Guard and recently returned from an overseas deployment to the Middle East in support of U.S. contingency operations. Ish is an enrolled agent serving as principal at Sigma Tax in California and as a member of the ABA section of Taxation Outreach and Inclusion Committee. Does a lot, including for planning this panel. Ish advises individuals, their small businesses, and foreign residents on cross-border tax compliance and reporting. He represents taxpayers before the IRS and state agencies and audits, appeals, and collections. Lastly, he provides peer-to-peer research on international taxation and other issues. Lori is the Department Chair of Accounting and Financial Analysis at California Lutheran University and an MSAF and MBA instructor at Pepperdine, where she is a doctor in business administration candidate. She's already has her MBA and is a registered CPA. She's also a small business owner and is in Switzerland right now. And Nick is a partner at Frost Law in Baltimore, Maryland, where he serves as the chair of the firm's law clerk and internship programs. Nick helps individuals and businesses with a variety of tax-related matters find relief through his efforts as a tax attorney. He does negotiations, he does settlements, criminal investigations, tax planning, and strategy development. In the community, Nick serves as a member of the Maryland State Bar Association, Taxation Law Section, as a member of the Tax Law Section Council, and a variety of other volunteer work. When he's not advocating for his clients, he spends time with his family in Howard County. He's also an avid Baltimore sports fan. Okay, diving right in, because we have a lot of questions for all of you. If we just go and we can start with, I'm going to go left to right on what I'm seeing. Nick, then Demetrius, then Lori, then Ish. What inspired you to pursue a career in tax law?
Sure. Well, I'm a fun one to start off with here because I sort of fell into it, to be honest with you. It wasn't, I didn't enter law school knowing that this was going to be where it would take me. It may not have been my plan right away, but I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. But I always had interest in tax when I was younger. I was always a numbers person growing up, frankly. I know a little better now, but I like the idea in my mind that tax law, there was more finite answers than there would be in when I went to law school, and everything was just hypothetical. Who knows what this may be? Who knows what that may be? But with tax law, I'm like, oh, it's numbers. I can figure this out. There's going to be one correct answer, and I'll get to that. Little did I know, tax has quite a few variations to every question, every answer, just like the rest of the law.
Yeah, my story is probably very similar to Nick in the sense of didn't go to law school thinking I was going to be a tax attorney. Actually thought I was going to be a family law attorney, but my school required us to take a tax course, and I was a student who had gone to law school after a couple of years in the workforce, and so I had done my own taxes, sort of felt I knew what I was doing, and I didn't do very well in that course, and it sort of my stubbornness took over, and I sort of started to take more courses, believing that I knew what I was talking about, and eventually became a tax attorney because I had taken so many courses that just knew that that's where I was going to be. Um, so yeah, it wasn't never planned. Just kind of fell into it from my pure stubbornness.
So my story is a little bit opposite of Nick's. When I was taking tax classes for my accounting degree in undergrad, I liked how kind of gray area, ambiguous tax was as compared to financial accounting, where there's a rule, you follow it for the most part. And so I liked the gray areas of tax, and that is kind of how I ended up becoming a tax CPA, and then later, obviously, turning into an educator.
And I guess my story is the opposite because I originally started out in computer science and engineering, the fascination with numbers that we all share. And during a sabbatical, I sort of got involved with an international tax issue a family member was having, and I looked into it and I said, you know what? Law, I mean, it looks tax law looks a lot like an algorithm. There's a code, and then if you want to go into details, there's the regs. And if you hit, if you get stuck somewhere, there's probably a quote unquote research paper or what we might call court precedent somewhere that shows you the way. I said, okay, this looks as fascinating as what I'm doing, maybe more fascinating. And that's how I fell into tax law.
What a fascinating variety of answers. That's great. A couple more general questions before we sort of dive into the specifics of everybody's practice. What was your first tax job, and how did you get that job? And this question I think can help people. Most of the younger folks that are listening in are probably trying to think of entering the workforce, especially at a difficult time.
Sure. Well, it was a difficult time in the legal market when I entered the workforce as well, so I can relate to that. I understand it's not too pleasant, but my first job in the legal community when I left law school, I applied for a job at the Comptroller of Maryland. That's our state taxing agency. Funny enough, during our interview process, they gave us a few different prompts with these relevant statutes and essentially had us work as if it was a real world situation. We had to properly apply the law to the fact pattern. And obviously, it turns out I did pass that test and was hired shortly thereafter.
Yeah, so my first job was with Ernst& Young, now called EY. That was just basically a simple application. I knew I was going to start going into tax. I was in my LLM year, about to head into my LLM year. And so sort of applied knowing that I wanted to, get that experience in a big four firm. So interviewed and was able to land that job as my first job.
So I was, like many students, told to get an internship so that you could get ahead while you were still in school. I went to a local tax firm for an internship, and funny story, I was given a test and I did not know how to use an adding machine as a student who had never seen an adding machine, and like I'd seen one, I had never used one. So I did the entire test that they gave me, math and all, by pencil, and then erased my work so they wouldn't know I didn't use the adding machine. And they hired me for the tax season internship. And then from there, I went to work for Clifton Larson Allen after that.
And I had just taken sort of switched careers, taken the enrolled agent exam, wasn't quite sure, became an enrolled agent, didn't know what I was going to be doing ultimately. But I was happy to go on various public forums and answer people's tax questions. And somebody who used to run a national enrolled agent exam review course sort of noticed me there, and she reached out and said, "You seem good at like explaining stuff and teaching stuff to people. Would you like to become an instructor for my enrolled exam EA review course?" And I said, sure. So teaching was sort of the first job I got into and did my primary job for the first couple of years.
Wow, very good. One more round robin here. So now we've got tax attorneys, we have Lori, CPA, academic, got a lot going on, and then Ish is an enrolled agent. And I think Nick's focus is a little more on controversy, and Demetrius, I think, is more transactional within the tax law space. Could each of you describe a little bit about what you do on a daily basis to give the audience a little bit of an idea of what distinguishes what you do from other the types of jobs that other people on the panel are doing. What makes your special area of practice unique?
Sure. Yeah, for those that don't understand, I mean, tax controversy work is essentially defense law is probably the best way to put it for uh, taxpayers with any sort of tax issue. Um, my day is a mix of negotiating with all the taxing agencies. I'm talking the IRS, any of the states, the subdivisions. For example, Maryland, we have our state unemployment tax division. I know that's throughout the country as well. I also supervise junior attorneys who handle their cases. A lot of being pulled left and right because you never really know what's going to come day to day. But includes, audits, criminal cases. We call them just collection cases where some of our clients just owe liabilities and are trying to figure out a way to resolve those balances with the taxing agencies. And then, just making sure the trains run on time and keeping everything afloat for all of our clients.
Yeah, so I think me versus Nick in that regards is my sort of practice focuses on before something happens. So generally, a deal is about to happen, an executive is about to be hired, we're about to have a client acquire real estate, or we're about to do some sort of event in the future. And so then I am brought in to understand what are the implications if we do this transaction from a tax perspective. How do we maximize tax efficiencies in the transaction and then reduce risk from a tax perspective? So a lot of my work is sort of pre-planning, hoping it never gets to Nick's level. And then when it does, then Nick sort of takes over from there.
So my work is twofold. My work is kind of in between Demetrius and Nick's. As a small business owner, I prepare tax returns for nonprofits, for businesses, for individuals. I do it personally for select clients, but as an educator, my day includes teaching students about tax law and teaching them how to prepare tax returns and answering questions and little nuances. So. I'm only occasionally speaking with the IRS or a state agency, but for the most part, I spend my time doing research and also working with students on learning the law.
And I suppose a lot of my work is also representation, which essentially is another term for tax controversy. So it's more like Nick's, which is interacting with clients, gathering facts, analyzing rules, kind of being a detective work, doing research, technical analysis, talking to the IRS, state agencies, figuring out what went wrong or what's going on during the administrative part of whatever the controversy is, and then turning that complexity into something that can both be explained to the client and into a workable plan for moving forward and getting this resolved before it gets to a litigation posture where either Nick or Demetrius would have to, I'd have to call in one of them.
Very good. So following up on that, Ish, how is an EA's representation of taxpayers different from a tax attorney's representation? Can you say more about the distinguishing
Sure.
features of those?
EAs, well, enrolled agents, CPAs, and attorneys are what are called the Treasury or IRS calls Circular 230 practitioners. And we're the three categories that have unlimited rights to represent taxpayers before all levels of the IRS. I mean, it's not that EAs and CPAs often just prepare tax returns, but that's the common impression. But we can also do representation, all three categories, to all levels of the IRS. Where things separate is when it gets to court, either tax court or federal court. And that's where attorneys come in. There's a special designation called the U.S. Tax Court Practitioner, although there are not too many people that have it because it's based on a pretty difficult exam, as I understand it. But I'd say if you want like a clean doctrinal break, then EAs and CPAs can represent, and attorneys can represent at all levels of the IRS, while once it gets to a matter gets to tax court or federal court litigation posture, that's when you'd need an attorney to absolutely come in.
Thank you. Uh, Nick, back to you. Uh, what is your role when working on criminal tax investigations? You mentioned a lot of negotiation as part of your whole practice, but what specifically is your criminal tax work like?
Sure. Well, I mean, in criminal tax cases, that's obviously Uh, that's as serious as it gets for our clients. That's all the work, all the other work we do tries to prevent it from getting to that stage. To be clear, this is the end of the road. Financial issues can be very stressful and as bad as it may seem, but it can always get worse if you begin a criminal investigation. So, first and foremost, it's just working with our clients to prevent this from ever happening in the first place. But if it does happen, I mean, look, I've worked on a range of cases ranging from, CI, criminal investigations, all the way to plea negotiations and sentencing hearings. I mean, these cases can be really hard if they've already been picked up at this point, because once you're a subject of their investigation, yeah, it's hard to get your client out of it. It's not impossible, but it's hard. A lot of times when CI gets involved, or if they've already made a referral to DOJ, a lot of times it's just about minimizing the damage and managing the situation as best as possible. Making it as manageable for your client to get out of this and move on with their life once this is all said and done.
Very good. Lori, you have an MBA and a CPA, and you're finishing your DBA. You're very well educated. What value does each of these degrees provide you and tax practitioners more broadly?
So I would say that the CPA gave me and kind of showed the people that I have the technical expertise in order to be their tax accountant, represent them. The MBA helped me understand more so how business owners might be approaching me and the things they might want to do with their businesses. And the DBA, the Doctor of Business Administration, and it taught me how to research more deeply into different like behavioral. So I studied consumer behavior quite deeply in the accounting world. And so it kind of gives me a better perspective on research and understanding human behavior, I would say. And everybody, when they're doing, like, when they want tax services, is engaging in that consumer behavior.
Very interesting. And while we're on the subject of education, Demetrius, you've got your LLM in taxation of business. Uh, what are the pros and cons of getting an LLM if you want to be a tax lawyer?
Yeah, good question. Sort of actually what Lori talked about when you talked about credibility. So anyone can be sort of practice tax law with a JD as Ish talked about. IRS sort of allows you to do that, but there aren't generally a lot of tax related courses in law school, and so you may have the analytical skills that you've developed sort of through law school, but not necessarily the technical expertise or sort of seeing sort of how the tax code plays differently than some other areas of law. And so I think for me, the LLM sort of really helped me understand, partnership law and tax law and corporate tax sort of situations. And so had a very good baseline where I could have a conversation with a client and really understand both the legal aspects of it and the tax aspects, and then sort of how those two play. So I would say, what are the pros? The pros is it adds an additional knowledge base to sort of the depth that law school gives you that you're not going to get from law school itself. The con is obviously you got to spend an extra year, getting an additional education in order to do so. There's cost benefit analysis that you have to do there. But I would generally tell anyone who wants to practice in this space that you either need to go get your CPA, which would require another year generally anyway from your current education, or you need to get an LLM to sort of just have that baseline in order to practice in this space.
Got it. Very helpful. Now that we've explored a little bit into each sort of specific area of practice, let's do another round robin and just say what's the most challenging aspect of your job? Starting back with you, Nick.
Sorry, I had to unmute there. Um, yeah, I mean the most challenging aspect of my job has to be client management. This may not apply obviously if you're in the public sector or different areas of practice, but for us, it's the thing they don't really prep you for a ton when you're in law school or you're wherever you may be. It's learning how to deal with your clients and keep them happy. I mean, look, you're charging them and charging them a fee for your services, so they're paying for it. So they expect your work to be done and be done correctly. So you have to show them that value, show that you're providing them value, work hard. You got to be open to communicate. You're there to answer questions and do what you can to help them get the result that they want or as close to it as possible. I mean, it's absolutely just being able to handle that, and it's a skill that I'm forever learning. There's new problems will pop up every day, and you have to figure out how to handle them.
Yeah, I would say the most challenging aspect I think of my job is probably both internally and externally. And when I say that, I mean internally, taxes sometimes in law firms, what gets brought to the table at the end of the transaction. Hey, let's just make sure someone talks to tax before we close this thing. And so we're generally behind the eight ball as it relates to how the deal was structured, why it was structured that way. And so the challenging part is educating my peers on the value of having a tax person in the conversation early. Because while we don't want to blow up the deal from a tax perspective, we can bring a different sort of lens to the conversation that doesn't necessarily change the economics, but just make sure that everyone's aware about how they may play differently from a tax perspective. Um, the other piece I think is tax touches everything. I mean, you die, there's tax. You get married, there's tax, right? So it's kind of just helping people understand that anything you do, there's probably a tax implication. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, but just like let's chat. Let's talk about it.
So my most challenging thing is completely different as an educator. It's really understanding like and giving students the depth and the knowledge that they need to be helpful once they graduate. Some universities have 1 semester long tax class, some have two. So without possibly either going into law school or going to get a master's in taxation, it's very difficult to provide students the basics and also some complexities and like the ability to help clients plan or to, think of things that might be like Demetrius said, like tax touches everything kind of. So when I'm trying to teach students that might have a further implication, there's a very limited time. So that can be a challenge.
I guess I'd sort of be with Nick here in that for clients, most of my clients really have international foreign account issues. The biggest part is getting the challenge is usually getting a complete factual picture from them before starting to figure out what the problem might be and to help them understand what the consequences might be when they're under stress. I mean, just a real simple example is we talk about foreign accounts, right? But for somebody who's just a first generation immigrant, or maybe who's here on a work visa, or maybe, English isn't their first language. They're used to a different tax system. If you just ask a generic foreign account question, they might not think of their home country as a foreign country. And so they have never really sort of reported those, which is the root of a lot of problems in my area. But that's the challenge, just getting a complete picture from the client and making client management, making sure they understand what's happening and there's informed consent to move forward on the best path forward.
Very helpful. Now, Demetrius, back to you. One more thing, clarifying what your practice looks like and what you advise young folks building their practice. You have, at least I understand it, something of a multifaceted practice. You've worked on SALT, you've done reorgs, you've worked on tax exempt. You've done quite a few different, it seems like, types of tax work. Do you recommend that young tax attorneys focus on depth, breadth, or both?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think in order to answer that question, you have to understand what part of the marketplace you intend to play in. Um, so, when you're at a much smaller organization, firm, you are the guy, you have to have sort of a broad scope of knowledge base in order to help. When you are at a much larger organization, a big four accounting firm, a big law firm, those situations, or in public practice and you're very, niche, then it's okay. I think you really do want to get in sort of as deep into that knowledge base as possible because you are going to be that person who everyone's going to come to for that particular problem every single time. So I think it really depends on the space that you find yourself in and where you want to go. At times for me, it's helpful to have a broad scope of knowledge because I can sort of identify fact patterns more quickly then that if I need to go depth, then I can find someone who has the depth of that knowledge. And so I think it really depends on what space you want to play in.
Very, very helpful. Yeah, pivoting a little bit now, each of our panelists does quite a bit to give back in the field, which is really great to see. And I want to learn a little bit more about that. And so, Ish, you're really involved with several different nonprofit and volunteer work. I know you're really involved with the ABA section on taxation. Tell us a little bit about how you've been serving and what the section offers to young tax professionals, including those that aren't attorneys.
Yes, I think so. There may be a misconception out there that the ABA tax section is only focused on attorneys, but it is not. It is for all three kinds of practitioners, including CPAs and enrolled agents. Anybody who's doing any kind of controversy work, in my opinion, should become a member of the section. It is well worth it. I've been immersed in it for well, about close to about 2 years at this point, and both giving back to the community and learning from it has been invaluable. For example, one of the things you couldn't do in one of the EA or CPA organizations probably is contribute to comment letters on proposed regulations. I helped in putting together our comment letter, the ABA's comment letter on the no to tax on tips deductions, but the final regs came out recently, and we were happy to see that some of our recommendations had been adopted by Treasury. And I think for that kind of thing, if you want to be on the cutting edge, and the thing that originally drew me into the tax section was that they were on the cutting edge of international tax issues. But I think it's, as I look at all of the committees and everything, it's on the cutting edge of sort of everything. Plus, there's a lot of CLE, CPE, a lot of networking opportunities. And the one thing that the section heads have sort of told me is that attorneys do not generally prepare tax returns. So it's sort of a synergistic, symbiotic thing where EAs and CPAs and attorneys all networking together can help everybody. And so I really wish, our goal is the outreach committee's goal is to have more members joined more non-attorney members joined the tax section and both benefit from it and be able to sort of give back to it.
Very good. And Nick, I just want to read a few things you're involved in. You have an impressive list of stuff, and then ask you about it. You're president of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals, Political Action Committee. You're actively involved in the ABA and the Maryland State Bar Association tax law section. You've got other things going on, I know. What are some of the benefits these types of organizations provide? What are some of the things that you're doing, the things that you get to see and do that younger tax professionals can try to get involved with these organizations to build their skills?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's great to do as much as you possibly can. We're all busy, but whatever you can fit in your schedule, I always recommend it. I mean, it's a great way to meet others in your community, right? and you need to have a community, and I recommend just joining as many groups and meeting as many people as possible. I mean, doing these things, even selfishly, I'm learning new things every day doing these, including here today. I'm learning from all of you. There's always can learn from other tax professionals with different experiences. Frankly, if you're doing the exact same thing, somebody else may have a different experience with that and different strategy. You can learn, oh, I did X instead of Y. And you can really learn from that and apply it next time you're in that situation and help benefit you. I mean, it's the best way to educate yourself, continue to learn and meet others and communicate. And frankly, it's just good to have people, if you're having a bad day, people you can commiserate with who can relate and have experienced the same things that you have.
Lori, I know one of the things that you're working on is getting Gen Z more interested in accounting. I saw, among other things, some posts on LinkedIn and so forth. What's your sales pitch? Why should young people listening to this or the recording later on, why should a Gen Z student be interested in a career in accounting?
So a career in accounting has been stereotyped for a long time, as we're often, I'm sure that the rest of the panel here understands this, we're often stereotyped as the socially inept, behind our desk, can't leave, never gets a break, always doing, something tax related. There's a Grey's Anatomy episode, as a matter of fact, where the woman's like trying to prepare tax return from her hospital bed before she goes into surgery. So like that's an extreme. But my sales pitch to Gen Z is really that it's a high status career. We are looked up to, all of us with these different designations are looked up to by people who are in trouble, need help, just don't know what to do for themselves, for their business. And so it's a high status career, and there are so many areas that you can take it. I mean, there's four of us here that all do different things, and then there's even more in different accounting functions that we're not even touching on in tax. So my sales pitch really to Gen Z is that if you go into accounting and you don't like specifically the first type of thing you get into, there's something else probably that interests you about accounting or tax that you would enjoy.
And Demetrius, how has your military service helped you shape your professional career, whether um, where you're speaking or thinking or leadership skills? How has that had an effect on your tax practice and professional career?
Yeah, good question. I want to, before I answer that question, sort of make one comment on what Lori just said. And that is that there's a significant advantage, I think, for individuals who are thinking about entering, students who are thinking about entering the tax space, because there's a significant age gap, I think, between who is previously sort of been in this space and who is now entering this space. I can tell you from personal experience, most of my colleagues are 20 to 30 years older than I am. And so there is going to be a transition and a gap potentially that's going to exist that creates opportunities for people who really do want to play here. And it's a great job. Okay, so to go back to answer your question. So I have served in the military 15 years now. I joined before I was an attorney. I do not actually currently serve in the military as an attorney. I'm an engineer officer. And people always ask me all the time, why not? Um, and it helps actually answer your question, Dan. And that is the military and what I do on that side gives me a totally different perspective than what I do on a day-to-day basis. I get to use a different creative mind on that side. I get to understand problems differently. And then I get to combine the two intellects that I gain from each to sort of make a better me. And so that's really what I like about sort of my military experience is being able to see and experience things totally different in two different spaces and two different uniforms and then combine the knowledge that I gain from each to be a better lawyer or a better soldier.
Very good. Thank you. So I want to get a few more questions in that are specific to careers, and then go a little bit more into mentorship and what skills we as young tax attorneys or CPAs or EAs need to be developing, and maybe a little bit about what you're seeing with AI as well, because that's a huge concern for students right now uh, who are in the job market. So, Lori, back to you. What's rewarding about a career in academia, and what does it take to get a job in academia in the accounting and MBA world?
So it's rewarding to be an educator because people look up to you for one. So you have that leadership. So if you enjoy leadership, it's very interesting in that you also get to teach them and they come up with the most novel questions that even clients can't think of sometimes. Like so they can stump you and it leads you, and most educators are very interested in finding more information. So when a student can stump me with a question, that it very much pleases me because then I'm like, well, I have to go find that out too, but I will get back to you, and we will all have a discussion about it. So that's rewarding. How you get into education roles, there's multiple types of education roles. Community college and university lecturers typically only requires a master's degree. You're not tenured and you're not typically required to do any kind of scientific research. If you want to be a tenured professor, you typically need to have a doctorate, whether it's a PhD or in business, a DBA, and you have to publish research, and usually continually. So it can take a doctorate for one level, or you can do it with a master's degree at other levels. And it's just very interesting if you like to give back. Like we were talking about how Nick gives back. It feels like giving back because you get a chance to work with students, help them, mentor them in their career. But I know you're going to talk more about mentorship. So I will stay a little bit away from that. But you do get a chance to like really help students kind of guide them on their path. And that's rewarding.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Ish, you've developed an expertise in cross-border compliance and reporting. What are a few other areas of expertise an EA can develop?
I think the EA, I'm just going to go back to plugging the section for a minute because the one thing I missed is something that's unique in the section among all the other professional organizations I've been in, including EA and CPA organizations, is our tax section's focus on pro bono and low income taxpayer work. And that's an area that's very near and dear to my heart that I've been able to sort of get engaged in deeply while working with the tax section. And so that's another way to give back concretely, not just to the community, but to the people, to taxpayers at large. And I'd encourage, anybody who's not a member to also look at that aspect of becoming involved in pro bono work, which is rewarding from both a professional and a personal perspective. To get back to what you asked, the EA is sort of it's the only credential here that you can essentially depends on you passing a series of exams without there being a set, course, a degree or something that you need to get before. And it's the one credential that's essentially EAs are federal tax law. That's all it does. And what it also does is, I mean, it also opens up a lot of niches. I mean, for example, like you said, I've sort of, gotten into cross-border and international compliance, but there's things like controversy, which is collections, appeals, all that sort of thing, or specific niches, payroll tax or employment tax returns, retirement issues, specializing in seniors and Social Security, looking at specializing in students, for example, or people, parents who have students going into college. There's a vast variety of niches, and I think that makes in today's world, in today's environment, that sort of specialization, which you can sort of just do on your own, makes life a little easier rather than being a generalist and sort of taking all comers in. So within federal tax, as an EA, the world is sort of your oyster.
Great, great. Then Nick, I wanted to circle back. You'd mentioned a little bit about your experience at the Comptroller Maryland's office. A lot of tax students in the law world, I think also accounting world, want to go straight to a large firm or Big Four accounting or something like that. And you went to the Comptroller of Maryland's office and got really valuable experience. What did that do to equip you for your role today? What are some of the advantages of starting out at a government tax office?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would do it the exact same way again if I could. I mean, it was a great place to get my feet wet, and essentially just learn the basics of tax law in the real world outside of a classroom setting. Obviously, there's things you learn in law school, but get hands-on and learn it uh, as a professional is great. It's a whole different level of education. Um, and obviously, while this is important work we were doing, it was less pressure than diving right into the private practice setting. It's a little slower pace, so I could learn and grow as an attorney, opposed to just diving into the deep end. It allowed me to kind of take my time. The deadlines that were internal, not external, which just gave me the breathing room I needed to help learn and educate. And then, now I know these things that I wouldn't have learned if I came right into the private practice. I would have to learn it on the fly. And now, having learned it in public sector first, it gave me time to educate myself and be prepared to handle things when there's an urgent deadline or something that needs to be addressed right away. I've seen it, albeit maybe from the other side, but I've seen it and I know how to handle it.
Very helpful. Very good. So pivoting now, I want to pivot to mentorship a little bit, to skill development a little bit, and then wrap things up as we close. So for mentorship, let's do a round robin again with Nick, then Demetrius, and Laura, then Ish. Uh, in your particular fields, have you sought out specific mentors, or have your mentoring relationships evolved more organically?
Sure. For me, I mean, it's definitely been more organic. I mean, these things tend to find those who want help. If you want help, it'll find you essentially. Um, Having said that, funny enough, internally at our firm, we have a mentorship program for some of our younger attorneys, which I think has been really helpful. Um, Allows them to go to another attorney who's maybe been there a few years longer than they have, opposed to going to a supervisor, a partner, someone else who, frankly, may be busy, or the younger attorney may just be too scared to go to with every question. They don't want to ask them every time. They don't want to look like they don't know everything. Nobody knows everything, so it's nice to have someone you can reach out to at a more peer-to-peer level.
Yeah, I think my most influential mentors have been ones that I actually have sought out, and that came from participating in tax committees. So Ohio State Bar Association has a tax committee very similar to the ABA. And so seeing, who were the best of the best and sort of having conversations with them to say, hey, how did that happen? And so still now, after practicing for a while, still grab, lunch with those guys, just to catch up and make sure, as they've continued in their career, just to continue to pick their brain, how they've continued to grow, throughout their career.
So for me, my mentoring relationships have been a combination. Sometimes a partner saw something in me that they wanted to like foster. Like I got to learn estate tax and estate planning early on in my career for that reason. And then mentorship, like that I also sought out. I do behavioral research partially because a mentor I sought out during my doctorate program who does behavioral accounting research into and finance research into fraud and different fraud scenarios and what helps us prevent fraud, whistleblowers, things like that. And so that was a mentorship relationship that I sought out. But there is, since I do research in like what's preventing students from wanting to be in the practice, there is research that shows that a lot of young people didn't enter auditing or accounting because they did not have a mentor. So I would encourage anyone listening to this that, if you don't have a mentor, seek one out if it's something that sounds interesting to you, because we are more than happy to share our knowledge and help another person along that is interested in this field.
Yeah, my mentoring relationships, like Nick, have more been or again, because as Laurie said, I think our profession is one of the most generous and giving ones in terms of both knowledge and time. As long as somebody asks, where someone else is there to help. And that's how most of my mentoring relationships, both as mentor and like was as mentee and mentor, have formed. And the other aspect is sort of just being showing up and volunteering, because that's the other way that mentors have found me. Like, for example, one of the tax section committees, civil and criminal tax penalties. I've had, found mentors who are like veterans, people who've seen a lot of stuff, and people who otherwise would not have had that much of a chance to interact with. So that's the other thing. I mean, even organic relationships, you sort of have to seed them, give them a chance to form, and being part of these organizations, volunteering, and just meeting people is one way to make those relationships happen.
Good. So, Nick, you're very involved both in the organizations we talked about and you're chair of your firm's law clerk and internship programs. I'm going to guess that that involves a lot of mentoring. I wish we had time for everybody to answer this question, but I'll just ask you, what's your mentoring style?
Sure. I tend to be, I tend to be a believer in hands-on learning because that's how I best learn, frankly. And so I know not maybe not apply to everyone, but for me, the best way to learn is by doing. So I don't want to say I toss people into the deep end because that's not true. But it's, give them a project, let them learn, let them make mistakes, figure it out on your own, and you grow from that. It's not everything we do. There's a second set of eyes, often third, fourth set of eyes on things to make sure things aren't being done with mistakes going out. So, you can make a mistake. That's how you learn. Practice makes perfect is really the simple way I look at it, and I think that's I think that's helped me get to where I am today.
Very good. So now we can pivot to sort of skills and professional development before we wrap up. Um, Demetrius, you are a partner, you've got the military experience and involvement, and you're a family man as well. How do you build your brand as a tax practitioner while avoiding burnout?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Um, I think it's about not being married to the job, right? I enjoy what I do, and so I think sometimes I have to step back because I would do it probably more often than I should. But understanding that my values to my family, to my spouse, to myself are also important. And so making sure that I'm dedicating appropriate time to those individuals that are important to me, because the law will always be there. Most of us are going to practice for the next, for probably 60 years of our life. It's not a hard job, right? So making sure throughout those 60 years of practice that um, I pay attention to the things that are important.
And so, Ish, uh, you've got your computer science background and a lot of good tax experience. What type of technical skills or expertise helps you in your daily practice and you think kind of expands across disciplines for young people to develop?
Technical skill, I'd say, and again, this is something I learned like sort of from before, is issue spotting. Issue spotting is like one of the most critical skills you can have. It's not necessarily something that you need to pick up from law or taxes or accounting. It can just sort of sometimes be innate, but that's the one sort of technical skill. I mean, spotting issues, and the other thing I'd say is then being able to do the research to figure out what rule is going to apply. I'd say that's the technical skill that, sort of carries over from no matter what your background is and can really help you in this area of practice.
And sort of the other part of that question for Lori, since you're involved in the heavy in teaching and academics, I think you'd be the right person to ask us, what soft skills should tax practitioners be developing? What are they going to be using on a daily basis? What are some communication tips to help uh, distill these complicated subjects into understandable communications for clients and colleagues?
That is a perfect question for me because I spend a lot of time actually focused on what like the AICPA and what the Bar Association and different groups think we need for technical skills, as well as now it's evolved into what is the soft skills, like what soft skills help us. So leadership is definitely one that you will need in this field, but also empathy. And I would probably guess all of us would agree with that. People come to you, especially in Nick's position and Ish's position, they come to you with problems. My position too, even as a small business tax practitioner too, they come to you knowing that they're a surgeon or they're heavy into engineering or something of their own specialty. And so they often lead with, I've had PhDs lead with this. I'm very smart and surgeons. I'm very smart, but I just don't know this. And so don't make me feel dumb. That's what they're telling you under the surface is don't make me feel dumb, but can you help me with my problem? And so empathy is a soft skill that is very important. What you mentioned about communication skills is very important. Being able to take that technical, the technical and being able to bring it down to a level that the average person can understand what you're saying to them is crucial. So, yeah, empathy, leadership, communication are all very excellent soft skills for this type of work.
Very helpful. So we're almost out of time. I think we've got time for about two more questions or so. Let's do Nick, then Demetrius, and Lauren-ish. This question's been on lots of people's minds, I think. How is AI changing your job and the value you provide to clients? And maybe another part of that is uh, to a young student, is AI a threat to them? How to develop themselves to compete with AI or use it?
I don't think it's a threat. I think you need to learn how to use it though. I mean, if you haven't already begun adapting to AI, then you're behind and you need to catch up. Whether you want to or not, it's here and it's going to stay here and it's only evolving. So, look, like anyone can now look up basic questions. The answers may vary and they may not always be accurate, so you should certainly double check everything. But it's about knowing how to take the information you learn from AI, like sorting through all the BS and properly applying it to the facts at hand. Utilizing your tax background, your legal knowledge and experience. AI can help find that information for you, but knowing how to apply it. Um, yeah, I've seen, I utilize AI. I've seen it apply it incorrectly, but fortunately, I knew better, and I was still able to take something from it and properly apply it and learn from it and grow. It's a great tool to have, but you can't rely solely on it. I mean, I think it helps with, at this stage at least, it's certainly helping with research and putting some things together, but it's not replacing anyone. It's just evolving what we do.
It's funny. I had a conversation with this exact topic with someone last night, and I told him I don't think AI is smarter than us yet. And I say that because, like Ish mentioned, our job is really issue spotting, right? So the AI can look up the law, it can tell you what code section says what, but what it can't do is understand how do I apply the law to the facts, and how do I pull additional facts from the client to make sure that it's in line with the law. That's what it can't do yet. And so maybe there becomes a point in time that we should really be concerned. But I would tell a someone who's entering this space is you got to get really good at fact finding. And if you're really good at fact finding, and the rest of it doesn't matter. It may change the value prop that we have to present to clients, but it doesn't change the value that we're going to bring to clients.
I talk to students a lot about AI, and like Nick said, if you're not using it now, you're somewhat behind. And so, what it can be used for and what it's very good at is the research, but you have to verify it because it will hallucinate. Sources still, even to this day. It got better at not hallucinating, but it still does. It can write well for you, and then you can edit it. So it makes it faster to write communications to clients, and then you can edit them to be, okay, that's not what I meant, or that's not how I want to portray this. But it gets that done faster for you. It does speed up some of what you do. I have students that like to try and write entire papers with it, and that is something that's gotten quite a few professionals in trouble. And so AI is important to use, but I tell students also what I'm doing now is trying to teach them not to so much do the nitty gritty, because AI can do the journal entries. It can fill out some tax forms relatively well now too. But you need to be, like Demetrius said, you need to be the advisor. You need to be able to look at their information and then use that to like solve problems for them and advise them on moving forward what is helpful for them. So that's how it can help, in my opinion.
Um, I like to think of AI not as artificial intelligence, but more like augmented intelligence. It's there to augment you. It's there to help make, not replace you, but help to make us faster. And I found AI is good at doing it's kind of like transition that from say libraries to search engines, or as some veterans say, from the old like hardbound reporters to Lexis and Westlaw that happened back in the day. This is just another tool that's going to make things more efficient for those who learn to employ it correctly. Yes, it'll find, you can ask it to find authority. You can ask it to summarize authority. You can ask it to draft client communications, as Laurie said. It'll make that first step faster, but from then it's humans doing what humans have always done best. That's as Demetrius said, judgment, ethics, figuring out what facts actually matter, what to say or not say, what to file or not file. That's still very human work, and I don't see AI replacing us completely anytime soon.
All right. Well, 2 minutes left. One more question for Lori. Uh, so you're dealing with a lot of students. Say that you have an undergrad deciding between JD, CPA, EA, maybe an academic route, business-oriented paths. What are a few things they should be thinking about when comparing those routes?
Um, we definitely, if I have an undergrad who's thinking about that, I often ask them, how much of the advising do you want to do? Do you want to get deep into the law? There are things, would you want to defend a client in court? Because obviously that is specific to attorneys. And my family is attorneys and pushed me to go there, but I took the route of a doctorate instead and enjoying the research. But a CPA can do a lot of that, but we're never going to they don't rely on us to draw up business documents, organization documents. So if that's something you want to do the planning, kind of like Demetrius talked about, or do a lot more of the representation at the higher levels, like Nick is doing, that would be where I would suggest a JD. And if you want to teach tax specifically, they often ask for a JD. A lot of universities like tax teachers that have JDs or LLMs. So CPA, you're there with them in the trenches, I'd say, more than an attorney is. A lot of attorneys then hand over clients to us after they do their piece of the planning. And then a CPA, we refer back to an attorney when it comes to organizing a nonprofit, et cetera. And then an EA, if you're not looking for that fifth year of education or to have to get a couple years of experience now, because the states have changed some of the CPA requirements, an EA can be a perfect designation if you know you want tax specifically and not necessarily to be in an auditor at all. So that's where I suggest an EA a lot.
Well, very good. Wow, this has been incredible. Thank you to each of our panelists and to the ABA section on taxation for helping put this together. We won't take any more of your time, but we sure do appreciate you participating and hope that everyone has a great rest of the day. All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
everyone.